Really?
So
clarinet's a gateway instrument?
Apparently so. All right, I think we're ready for you.
All right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a Christian and an atheist walk into a bar. I am your host, Jay, the devil went down to Georgia, Stooksbury. And with me, as always, is my co-host, Ty. Jesus is just all right with me, Gallenbeck. And if you couldn't tell by the intro here, we're going to lean towards the topic of music today.
That's right. I was kind of hoping you were going, what if God was one of us?
That's another good one.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, so we're just going to dive right in, and then we'll come back to beverages, I guess, because one of the questions that, as we were brainstorming for this, was what was the first music you can remember listening to? Mm-hmm. And The Devil Went Down to Georgia was actually the first song I can very distinctly remember listening to.
And we did not coordinate that
at all.
No,
we did not. And I actually had the tape. I can remember listening to the tape on a Walkman, and I would take it to elementary school, and I thought I was so cool because it cussed. And that was like the thing. Like, I would like play it for people because you got to hear this, because it said a cuss word. So there you go.
Nice. Oh, well, there you go. A little serendipity before we even start here.
Perfectly timed intro right there. So.
Well, you know, I try to impress with that. So
yeah, with writing it down as we sit down for this.
Yeah. Everything we do is very well planned and very well coordinated, obviously.
Yes. So, hey, what are you drinking tonight, Jay?
So I'm drinking the New Belgium Fat Tire Special Release Belgian White. So it's not like the traditional Fat Tire; it's actually the Belgian White style, and it's good. It's not bad, not amazing, but it'll do for right now.
There you go.
Yeah.
Got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And I am drinking the New Belgium Voodoo Ranger Imperial IPA, which for me, this is one of my favorite releases they put out in the last few years.
Yeah.
I mean, their Fat Tire and Sunshine Weed are always go-tos, but This has definitely been one that I'll pick this up from time to time. I enjoy it. So
I like it more than the traditional Ranger, like just not the non-voodoo version.
Right.
My wife absolutely hates the Ranger one. She calls it like you're tasting a pine cone.
Yeah. It is. It's a very, very bitter hopped IPA, and I feel like this has a little more body than the bitterness. So yeah. Talking about music, Jay and I have discovered, as we've been friends and hanging out, that surprisingly our music interest coincide more than you would think in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
He actually took me to the airport the other day and, has his old school iPod plugged in with 5 million songs on it. But, most of them I'm like, oh, I love this song. I haven't heard this in forever. And so it's fun just to see, I think, some of those similarities that you wouldn't discover, some of those things that you can just agree on.
Yeah. And we actually, after we recorded our last episode, which seems like ages ago right now. It was.
We apologize.
Yeah. We sat around the microphone when all the microphones were off and just chatted about music. We talked about shows that we went to and, kind of guilty pleasures in music and, good shows, bad shows, and I think we talked for like another hour or 2 hours afterwards, just drinking whiskey and talking about music. So we figured that we might as well just continue that conversation with the microphones on this time.
That's right. And I think I know my wife is this way. She grew up around music, and for me, I know at various points in my life, music has been so influential in my person and the way, everything about it. And some of my closest memories and dearest memories are musically associated. And so I think it's a great topic because people love to talk about music.
Right.
So,
and the one question I've always wondered about this too is, do you play a musical instrument at all?
I have tried a variety. So I played clarinet in middle school because they wouldn't let you play saxophone without playing clarinet when I started band.
Really?
So
clarinet's a gateway instrument?
Apparently so. Yes, let's go with that. So played clarinet, then played alto sax, and then played baritone sax in jazz band. And what I really realized through that entire process is I have absolutely no rhythm. And so I quickly gave up.
Yeah.
DJ'd for a ton of years.
Right.
And actually tried to learn how to scratch and use and that's like playing the drums. And so I'm not good at it.
Scratch that.
Yes.
Yeah, I am just as musically inclined as you are. I think I played a little bit of piano and keyboard when I was a kid. I had no formal lessons at all, so it was mostly just me banging on it and making all sorts of terrible sounds with it. And I remember my mom ended up getting me the Casio keyboard just as a diversion because it had those built-in beats and stuff in it.
Yes.
Yeah, so I could play that and it sounded like I was actually doing something. But, and then I had a kind of a wild hair when I first moved out to Delta. I was really getting into bluegrass music, and I decided I was going to try to learn to play the banjo.
Oh, nice!
And I took some local lessons, and I bought DVDs, and then I tried to self-teach too. And it was just one of those things that I had peaked at a certain point, and I wasn't going to get any better, and I wasn't committed to really diving any further into it, and it just became one of those things that it started collecting dust, and I realized man, maybe someday I'll try it again, because I could play a couple of little songs with it, but just the dedication needed to really up my talent with it was just not there. So
yes,
yeah,
I totally understand. I tried to play bass for a little while. It was 2-year period, and just quickly gave up. So and my parents both played instruments. My dad's a guitar player, and my mom actually played banjo. And
nice.
So yeah, I can remember sitting around campfires as a kid and them jamming out, and I just don't have that skill set.
Yeah, I lack the rhythm too.
Yeah, it's terrible.
It shows in my dancing.
That's true. I DJ'd his wedding. It was
pretty ugly. Well, cool. Where do you want to start?
Well, I think we should start at the beginning.
Okay.
So I kind of answered my, first real music I remember listening to was Devil Went Down to Georgia. But what about for you?
My earliest memory of music was me singing Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA at the top of my lungs every single time it came on. And I mean, full on, windmill arm motions with the guitars too. And, Born in the USA. My dad, I was inundated with classic rock, so Bruce Springsteen, CCR, that type of music was really big in my household. But my parents, I think, have a video somewhere of me performing to that song too.
Nice.
Probably playing with a tennis racket as a guitar or something like that. But yeah, that was definitely my earliest memory as far as music is concerned.
How old were you, do you think?
Maybe 6, something like that, kindergarten age. I would have to guess.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty sure mine was second grade. I can remember a few things before that, but I don't. No, it would have had to have been second grade because the school I was at for sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
When you're bringing all that explicit content
that's right.
on school grounds.
And every time it was on the radio, I was like, haha, that's not the version I have. Yeah. So, all right. I very distinctly remember the first CD I bought.
Which dates us, right?
Oh, man. Well, the fact that I said Walkman on...
Yeah,
you know,
right.
we are creating digital content that is streamed from outer space to your phones, but you used to have to. Yeah. I mean, I can remember, like, listening to the radio and recording my own tapes and all that.
Yeah, me too. I actually... We didn't have the technology that actually had the tape player hooked into the radio. Okay. I had a radio that I held up. Physically held up a tape recorder to record the music. Wow. So you could hear like my mom yelling at me in the background, or me like falling down trying to record it because my arms were too tired.
But those were the best mixtapes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I remember having a mixtape with Peaches by the Presidency of the United States.
Yeah.
It had that song, I don't remember who did it, Rumors. Super 80s synth song that I loved at the time. Gosh, I don't remember what else was on it. I know those two were on it, and I listened to it till it fell apart because it was, all my favorite songs on one tape.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Now you can have thousands and not even notice it. So... But what was the first CD you ever purchased?
You're gonna laugh. Boys to Men, Cooley High Harmony.
Wow.
I'm pretty sure that was the very first CD. I had to think about it for a while. Like, what were, when I had the freedom to go wild and purchase my first CD, I'm pretty sure that was the first one I ever bought.
And why? Do you have a story behind it?
No, I just really I had a little. I had a phase where I thought I was black. Okay. At a young age.
Yeah, I went through that.
Yeah. I think all white kids at some point have that phase, which you'll see in some of these other stories too. But for some reason, I was like really into R&B at that time. Man, Boyz II Men, Cooley High Harmony was just like the best.
That was it. What was your favorite song off of it?
Oh gosh. I honestly can't say because I haven't listened to that album. I have no idea in over 2 decades probably. God, yeah, I don't even think I could list a song off of it, but I did enjoy it at the time.
There you go.
Yeah,
there you go. That's funny. I can remember I went to a friend's birthday party in 5th grade, and we stole CDs out of his older sister's room.
Oh, man.
And one of them was Rex and Effects Rump Shaker. Yes. And that CD, changed my life.
You're like, wow, Devil Went Down to Georgia is so PG.
Yeah. Whole nother level. And so that was... I can remember listening to that. I think, we played video games and had that on repeat for probably 4 hours.
Yeah.
And after that party, I don't remember how, but I found out a way to go and buy that CD, bought that CD, and listened to it constantly after that. Yeah. So, yeah.
Did you listen to it on your... Well, you didn't have a Walkman. Did you have a Discman?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I, in middle school... playing basketball, hip-hop became king, and but Rex and Effects, first CD I ever owned.
Nice.
Used to know all the words to Rump Shaker. Probably couldn't do it now. So.
Maybe we'll try that at the end of the episode.
We're going to need more than beer for that.
Well, you've got quite the selection, so.
It's true.
So we had another question, too, about the first music that you also hid from your parents. Was that one of them? Was Rump Shaker the one that you had to keep on the Discman and you couldn't play it out loud?
I bet I kept that pretty under wraps.
Yeah, I think that's the one that the rants would disapprove of.
Yeah, I can very clearly remember having Snoop Dogg, Doggy Style.
Yeah.
And that, I really feel like that even more was one I kind of like.
Yeah.
kept that CD case away and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So
right.
my cousin introduced me to one of those like CD subscription things that we used to do back in the day.
Like CD Now?
Yeah.
I remember that.
So
it's like they send that advertisements like 10 CDs for $10.
Yes. And then you're hooked that. And so but I know I got Snoop Dogg in that and had to kind of like open the package carefully and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, for me in the same vein was The Chronic by Dr. Dre. Yeah, that was one that you if your parents were gone, you could play it as loud as you wanted. But the second they came back, the headset had to come on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was middle school for me. All of those, Dr. Dre, Tupac, Snoop Dogg, those were the big ones then.
Yeah, they were great albums too.
They were. So I still, some of those songs, if you hear them to this day, bring back memories and moments and all of that kind of stuff.
Living in the hood.
Yep. of small town Colorado for me. I don't know where to go next. I'm trying to read our list. Go for it.
All right. So one of the questions that I came up with was I'm a big fan of live music. You can play music all day long, but I think where you really see how good a band is when you see them live, and that's the true testament of their talents. So the question I had was, did you ever have a band or a musician who you changed your mind about after seeing them live? And that could be for the good or for the bad.
Oh, wow. Two thoughts come to mind. I am 100% sure I've not seen nearly the number of live shows that you have. But I can remember going to watch, and we talked about this last time, but going to watch the English Beat play. And I kind of liked them at the time. They have a song on SLC Punk, which was
Mirror in the Bathroom,
which was my only real association with them. And so went and watched the show, but the show was in the winter, and the lead singer for the band stepped off the bus onto ice and actually broke his hip walking into the venue, and did the entire show sitting on a stool with a broken hip. And that was just one of those moments where I was like, that is the most badass thing I've ever seen. Like, I was like so impressed with it. I know I went out, bought their CDs and all that stuff after that, just because of that performance and the grit that it took to pull that off. So on a completely different spectrum for musical styles, I went and watched Trevor Hall. Have you ever heard of Trevor Hall? I would describe him as a crazy Buddhist hippie white version of Jack Johnson.
Okay.
But I saw him play in the Soiled Dove in Denver, and he freaking stole the show. Nice. Made a lifelong fan. I love his music now. So that was another one that I know. I mean, I didn't have any preconceived notions, but seeing him live dramatically changed anything I would ever thought about him. So what about you?
I had a couple for this one. And the first, I'll try to focus on the good ones. The ones that I was okay about before or didn't really care for them, and then I saw them live and they just blew my socks off. The one I always allude to is Andrew W.K. I don't know if you're familiar with him at all.
I'm not.
He right around this is like college age for me. He had a couple of songs that made it to commercial status, and he was actually like on commercials, and all his songs were these really cheesy things. Like the songs were like "We Want Fun," like all these just really. If you read the lyrics, there's not a lot of thought put into it. It's all about partying and drinking, and at the time I was in my aggro punk rock phase that thought, this guy is just so freaking cheesy, and he looks like a butt rocker. Like, he's got long hair, and and he wears all white all the time, but he always wears like wife beaters that are obviously, he's got like a mustard stain, and he's got pit stains. Like, he's just one of these guys that has no scruples about the way he looks. And he actually opened for Flogging Molly. I think it was like my freshman. No, it had to have been like my sophomore year or something like that. Wow. And I was so pissed off. I was like, what the heck is Flogging Molly doing, putting this cheese ball in front? And my wife, girlfriend at the time, was like, you know what? You don't. It's like, just go see the show. Go see the show. You don't judge just based off of this one listen. They picked him for a reason. You know, Flogging Molly has a pretty good taste in music, and they usually have some pretty good opening acts. And the guy got up and he stole the show. He was an absolute entertainer. And the thing that was great about him is that he just didn't care. Like, he honestly got up on stage. One of the very first things he said to someone was, do you not think that I know that I look like an idiot? Like, I know that I look like an idiot, and I don't care. And it was just, I've never had more fun in my life at that one particular, more unexpected fun, I should say, for just that one particular show. Another one that I was kind of similar vein of your Soiled Dove act is a guy named Damien Sumi, and he had a side band called Damien Sumi and the Minor Prophets. Okay. And you'd probably actually really like him. He's a devout Christian, and a lot of his songs are actually about Christ, and but also he writes about drinking, and you know, it's just kind of he really focuses on kind of the being a sinner and trying to find, you know, his own salvation. But I heard some of his songs, and he was opening for one of my other favorite bands, and I can't remember which show it was. It might have been like Murder by Death or something like that. And I didn't think anything of it, but we came in right when his set was playing. He had this song called the Lion, the Fish, and I'm going to butcher the name of the song now. I'll have to get back to you on that one. But either way, it was just this really powerful moment, like just the drum beat associated with it. It actually almost kind of like brought me to tears, like how good it was, you know. And like ever since then, I was like, this guy is legit. And that's coming from an atheist, you know, to hear such very devout lyrics. But I would highly recommend. And I think they're now defunct, like they broke up.
Right.
But they've put out some amazing music during that time frame. So, yeah. And then on the negative side, one of, like, when I was growing up, when I really started getting into punk music, I always heard about this band called the UK Subs. They were the kind of the godfathers of the British crust punk scene, you know. But they only performed in England, you know. They never toured. And then when I was in college, I got a flyer that said that the UK Subs were going to play at the Lion's Lair, which, if you know the Lion's Lair, it's this really kind of dingy dive bar venue, but it has some really raw events that happen there. And I was like, oh my gosh, the UK Subs are playing Denver. And I got, you know, my girlfriend and all these other friends who had been hyping it up. I was like just trying to get as many people as possible to go to it. And it was horrible. Oh, no. I can count on one hand how many times I've like walked out of a show and just like I think we walked out on like the second song or second or third song. It was so bad. It was really bad. And it would end up being like the lead singer of the UK Subs and then like just some fill-ins.
Right.
But it was so bad. And then ever since then, I've just never really seen them the same way.
Yeah. It's hard to recover from an experience like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like when you discover, you know, your dad's Santa Claus the whole time. You're like, oh man.
Do not disclaimer, we're going to have to put this at the front. Don't play this in front of your kids.
Yeah.
So, that'll ruin it.
Yeah. I know a lot of kids are into this type of podcast.
Well, there's parents who, may or may not listen with their kids in the car.
Right.
So,
Yeah, fair point.
So this, I don't think this is on our list, but it kind of came to mind. What's one band you've always wanted to see but haven't seen?
Oh.
I'm throwing you on the spot here.
One band I've always wanted to see but have never seen. So, even if they're from the 70s or anything like that.
Yeah, sure, why not?
Any band? That's tough. How about you? You go first, and
I've got one.
Okay.
And I think it will happen in my lifetime. It's definitely a goal of mine. But to go see OAR, and specifically, I really want to go see OAR at Red Rocks now because that album. I love OAR, but to hear them at that venue and the way they just kind of jam band in that setting, I think would be unreal. So that's definitely the top of my list on if I'm gonna go see a show, that may be the next show I go see right now.
Man, I couldn't think of anything while you were talking. So.
All right, moving on.
Yeah,
moving on.
I'll come back to that one.
Maybe you'll think of something.
Yeah. So one of the other ones where I thought this would be kind of a fun one. What would your walk-up song be? Now, just to back it up, for those who are not familiar in the world of baseball, predominantly in baseball, that there's a term of what's called walk-up music. So the batter is leaving the dugout, and he's doing his slow, intimidating walk to the batter's box, and he's got something blaring that's supposed to it's supposed to personify who he is, or it's supposed to get him hyped up, whatever the case may be. But I've always found it interesting, the phenomena of walk-up music, especially when it comes to high school sports, because there's sometimes I think kids just put some of the most god-awful music possible. But regardless,
they're high schoolers,
right? Yeah, I'm sure they think the same thing about what I would choose too.
Yeah, and they're not thinking through it very hard. I coach high school baseball. They don't think about it at all. Best high school walk-up song I've ever heard was a kid lost a bet, and the rest of the team got to pick his walk-on song.
Nice.
So I don't even remember what it was. I'm walking on sunshine or something like that, but it was bad. My walk-on song, without a doubt. But for me, when I picture walk-up song, because I was a pitcher, and that's what I love doing, I picture Mariano walking in from the dugout, from the bullpen in New York Stadium, with Enter Sandman coming on. That is okay, I want that moment. And for me, the new Disturbed Sound to Silence would be the most perfect walk-on song for any pitcher. And so that's kind of settled in as my yep, if I could somehow become a 25-year-old pitching phenom, that would be my walk-on song. So. Nice. What about you?
So you're gonna laugh. We have another moment of serendipity here, and I'll show you right here just so you can see.
Okay, he's handing me
my
his
cell phone and the walk-up song right there. So he just joked about the high schoolers forcing walking on sunshine. I actually listed that as ironically because I thought, how do you throw off your competition?
Right.
Because it's such a AC/DC, Metallica, especially, or hip hop.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
Troy Tulowitzki did that for years.
Right. Oh yeah.
Where he used ironic walk-up songs.
Yeah, like Justin Bieber.
Yeah.
And I remember that. Yeah. And so I actually wrote "Walking on Sunshine" by Katrina and the Waves, which I didn't know that beforehand.
No.
But then, I went back and forth on a lot of different ones because I think it's such a macho type thing, you know. And one song that came up in my mind was the Misfits, One Last Caress. I don't know if you're familiar with that one at all, but it has some pretty crude lyrics to it, so I doubt it'd be allowed at a high school. And then, you know, Slayer, Disciple, you know, you always have to have Slayer in my household.
That's true.
You DJ'd my wedding. We actually closed with Slayer.
That's right.
But there's also, I really like One by Metallica. And not necessarily, because it's kind of a slow build to a really hard edge kind of element to it. And I thought just that the darkness imprisoned me, you know, that part would be a really good walk-up type tune. But
there's definitely, like, you can take segments of songs that would be, you know, great walk-up songs. Perry Mason would be one that actually was our, like, infield outfield song for baseball when I was coaching for a while.
So something interesting when I was looking up, like, nerd that I am, I Google, how do you pick a walk-up song? And there is actually a study, there's some research done about the success of different genres related to performance, which you can't really, it's not an actual scientific study at all. But the one that I read was really funny is because they had flipped sort of scenario. So those who walked up to country music as batters were the top performing, highest batting average was people who listened to country music.
Okay.
And the worst performers were those who listened to Christian music.
Interesting.
But if you flipped it for the pitchers, the ones with the lowest ERA, their walk-on music was Christian music. And the worst were country.
All right.
Yeah, so there you go.
Baseball, you can find stats on anything. The guy that wrote that has as much free time as someone wanting to do a Christian and an atheist podcast, I think. So.
Yeah, probably not enough.
That's funny. So, I actually, one of my buddies was in minor league ball for a while, and I picked two of his walk-up songs. So,
how far did he go?
He made it. He played AA ball.
Nice.
In the Giants organization. So yeah. So I love walk-on songs. And in my current career, I make fun of my walk-on song as being Weird Al Yankovic's "White and Nerdy." So I still got a walk-on song, but it's not a good one. So. Because this is a Christian and an atheist walk into a bar, what do you think is the most influential music for you in regards to your worldview? Not necessarily all lifetime, but just maybe for that specific thing where you kind of resonated with it from a worldview perspective.
And are we still talking about musicians?
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Bands, single artists.
Okay, so... I thought a lot about this one, and it kind of relates to another question that I've written up to. We probably can just combine this one. The one band who I felt like really kind of followed me, or I followed them, and I kind of matured alongside with them, was Against Me.
Okay. Yeah.
So, for those who are not familiar, Against Me is started off as what was considered the folk punk genre, which was basically a style of punk rock with guys who banged on drums or banged on trash cans as drums and had acoustic guitars, and they never would play on a stage. They would always play in the middle of the room with everybody circled around them, singing their songs like at the top of their lungs,
Right.
And then they became this like 3-piece, and then that became a 4-piece, and then they started incorporating electric, into their set, and they kind of went, the Bob Dylan version of their development, where people thought they were sellouts for having electric guitars, But the lot of their kind of earlier songs were all about just being these kind of like disenfranchised kids, and they had some pretty outlandish songs, and probably one of my favorite ones by them is the song called "Baby, I'm an Anarchist," and it's this love song between two protesters. One's a devout anarchist, and the other's this kind of upwardly mobile progressive, And this whole song's about how, everything was fine, we were doing okay, and then I had to go throw that brick through the Starbucks window, and then we just went our separate ways, basically. And but then there was this. As they developed, their lyrics became kind of much more nuanced, and even more challenging. Back, kind of throwing back criticism towards the punk rock community. And then they came out with an album called White Crosses. That the very first song on it is called I Was a Teenage Anarchist. And it's this kind of this story about, it's this autobiographical story about kind of growing up with that mentality. And then the final words of it is like, the revolution was a lie,
Right.
just how everything that all those kind of, BS, youthful politics, and all the way punk rock is supposed to be something that celebrates the individual, but then it becomes this weird tribal collectivist sort of mentality,
Right.
and how it turns on people just who don't fit in perfectly into what is punk rock. And they're really fascinating characters in the story too, because the lead singer ended up actually coming out as transgendered shortly after that album, and went through the whole process, and now is a female that performs. And actually it broke up, there's only of the 4 original members, once they became a 4-piece, just him, or she, I should say, sorry, she and the lead guitarist stayed on. Everyone else just thought, I don't think it was necessarily like a bigoted thing. They just thought that it was kind of taking the band in a different direction.
Right.
It was a different identity that they didn't feel comfortable with. And it's just this, it's a really kind of a fascinating arc to their career, and I've followed it all along, and every album's different. They take storytelling to a really new height, and a lot of just great music along the way too. So that was kind of one of those bands shaped the way I see the world, and but still kind of keep connected to those earlier songs that were so antagonistic, and they still play them too. And she always tries to kind of talk about what the story was and where she was at the time of writing it, and you get that storyline that I personally connect with too.
Right. I could see that.
Yeah.
Listening to you talk about them doing the throwback, all I can think of is that line from SLC Punk at the very end where he's in the suit.
Right.
Of like,
I
guess when it all was said and done, I was just another
poser.
trendy-ass poser.
Yep,
like,
exactly. Yeah.
I think anybody, which I had a punk rock phase that I'm not sure we've talked about actually on air, but I know you and I have talked about. But I think almost everyone gets to that point where they realize just the reality of that kind of moment.
Mm-hmm.
For me, man, you thought that out. I should have went first because your answer was way better than mine. So I'll give a little backstory to why I feel like this band, and it's specifically one album from this band. So whereas you kind of followed a band's career, there was definitely one album for me that kind of I was able to latch onto and help me see things in a bunch of different ways. But there was a point in high school, and one of my closest friends gives me so much crap about this moment still to this day, where we went to a conference, a Christian conference, that was heavily against secular music.
Okay.
And that was kind of a big piece of what they were trying to do, and
no doggy style.
Yeah, no, those were bad.
Rex and effects.
Yeah. So and at the time, I definitely latched on to this and embraced it and took it in, and came home and threw CDs in a burning barrel fire, literally burned hundreds and hundreds of CDs, and would I do that again? Not in a million years.
Right.
But there was something about going through that process that I know positively changed who I am to this day. And mostly on and it's funny because I've sweared like 3 times on this podcast, but at the time, like, I can remember my language dramatically changed during that period. But the problem was, what I struggled with most during this time was Christian music sucked. Like, it was terrible.
Yeah, it is pretty bad.
And I spent hours and hours and hours trying to find music. And I mean, this was during, Napster's heyday, I think. And so I downloaded everything. Any band I could find, I was, downloading it and getting it, and all of it, I was just like, this is subpar compared to what I was listening to. And I ended up finding a band, which is huge in the Christian market now, but at the time, it was their first release called 1,000 Foot Crutch. And their first release, Puppet, was very much that rap rock, Limp Bizkit style music, and it was good. They had a DJ that could scratch. Their lyrics were great. They did a cover of Unbelievable that I was actually like, this is good, and I loved it. Listened to it nonstop. Actually got to see them in Norwood, Colorado, of all places.
Wow.
Now Norwood, Nucla, one of those two.
Same thing.
Yeah, tiny little town, and a room probably about the size of the one we're sitting in. And there was 50 of us, but man, they just brought it. And it was one of those things that just gave me hope that there was quality in that. And since then my views and all that have changed dramatically, but that band did speak to me during that time and very much influence kind of that stage of my life for sure. So
nice.
Yeah.
The image of you burning CDs and smashing them, it reminded me of one of my favorite moments in Straight Outta Compton, the new biopic about NWA. Is that they had that very same moment where all the guys are on their tour bus and there's some sort of protest outside of their show where they've got some guy with an actual roller that's just smashing everything, and everyone's stomping up and down on their CDs. And I think it was Eazy-E that was just laughing at it, and he just looked and said, well, they already bought it, so we got their money.
Yeah. My buddy that gives me crap about this all the time is like, you had original Warren G albums, and he's like, how could you burn that stuff? And I'm like, yeah.
Have you replenished your collection since then?
I definitely went through a phase where I restocked a lot of those albums.
Yeah.
They were probably burned copies more than original purchases by that point.
Thanks, Napster.
Yeah, exactly. Friends. Yeah, I can remember sitting in the tech lab at the high school with 7 DVD burners all going at the same time.
Wow.
Just copying friends' collections and sharing. And but
it's amazing how we've managed to date ourselves in multiple generations of technology. Yeah. Because even just burning CDs is lost on a lot of young people today.
Yeah, I said years ago that my least favorite part of digital music is the loss of the mixtape.
Yes, it's wholeheartedly agree.
It has ruined a very special creation creatively that you could share with someone.
Right.
I mean, I made multiple mixtapes for my wife in college and high school along those points. And some of those burned CDs are, some of the most influential songs at different points of our relationship.
Yeah,
and
right.
You can't do that anymore.
Yeah, you can make a playlist.
Yeah.
It's not the same.
But you can't even share that.
Right.
Like, there's too many copyright laws.
Yeah.
It's terrible. Terrible. So
I feel your anger towards Apple is spilling over a little bit.
we are Apple, we love you. Will you put our podcast on
Pretty
iTunes?
please.
We can't figure out why our picture doesn't meet your specifications.
I'm glad I've been able to share my pain in this now.
Gosh. Yeah, it's a nightmare. Someday we'll figure it out.
Oh, and while we were talking, I thought of the musician who I've never seen I would really like to see.
Okay.
Tina Turner.
Really?
Yes. I would love to go to a Tina Turner show, like a Vegas-style type show.
Right.
Yeah, because she is a phenomenal performer. You know? Yeah. That, or also Fleetwood Mac.
All right. That's seems like a more logical answer.
Yeah.
But,
Tina Turner
I didn't see Tina Turner coming. That one threw me off a bit.
Yeah.
So.
No, I'd like to see Tina Turner.
All right. Fair enough.
Yeah.
No. All right. So definitely the hardest question to close out here. And I've made notes and scratched stuff out and tried to figure this out. And if you asked me in 2 days, it would probably be different.
Yep. Same with me.
But there are, there's a couple that for sure would be on that list at all times. But the question is, what are the 5 top songs for you of all time? Maybe not in any specific order, probably, but just maybe 5 songs that you would never skip. That I don't know. These are how I tried to justify it, that I could put on any playlist and listen to. That have impacted my life, all those things. So, give one. Let's do one at a time.
Okay.
We'll go back and forth.
Cool. I like that. I kind of went through the same thought process. And it was hard. It was so hard. I tried to come up with, criteria for it. It's okay, which ones are the most played on my ancient iPod,
Right.
And it's no, that's not a really good criteria. So I try to think of songs that, it didn't matter what point of the day I heard it. Didn't matter what mood I was in. My attention would instantly turn to it, and I can lose myself in that particular song. And I can, I know the lyrics. I'm not mumbling along with it, and it also had some sort of timely significance to my life. So
we are very much on the same page.
See, man, we just serendipity again. We're on the same page with whether it's a belief in God or not. So the first one that was obvious for me was Foxglove by Murder by Death.
Okay.
And we've mentioned Murder by Death a couple of times in this podcast, but it's actually the song that I proposed to my wife for. I actually got the band to they do a show at the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, so I actually contacted them for the very first time they did that show. I said, hey, I'm thinking about proposing to my girlfriend then, and I'd like to do it to Foxglove. And it's this really mellow song.
Right.
The main lyric the main chorus is, "It was always you." And they wrote back right away, which they're this amazingly responsive band to their fans, and they said, okay, here's what we're gonna do, and I don't know if we have enough time to go into the story about it, but that's one song that I always will have to have on my list, just because it reminds me of that particular moment.
Right.
We also incorporated into the wedding too, obviously.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those songs that just always will put a smile on my face no matter what.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I didn't know that side of that story with that song.
Yeah,
so.
I'll tell you the full version
I was
afterwards.
Gonna say, maybe we'll have to figure out a we could tell engagement stories or something.
Yeah.
That's part of the podcast. So, number one, and not necessarily a number one song, but just the first song that always comes to mind for me, and lyrically, musically, everything about this song I just feel like is so good, is Under the Bridge by Red Hot Chili Peppers.
It's a good
and
song.
there's just something about it that no matter if I had heard it 50 times, I wouldn't skip it. And so there's something about that song that just connects to me, and I love. I don't have an engagement story to it, but that would be one on my list for sure.
Whenever I hear that song, all I could think of is Anthony Kiedis running at me in slow motion with no shirt on from the music video. I don't know if you've never seen it?
No.
Yeah, it's a great song. Yeah.
I grew up without any cable, so I didn't see my first music video, I think, until I was in college.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. So
nice.
There's a lot of those lost on me. So.
Okay. The next one for me is it's kind of a poppier one. It's a song called "Ever Fallen in Love" by the Buzzcocks. They're a kind of 80s pop punk band that really kind of set that standard of what that genre is. And they're quirky and kind of, absurd at times, but it's one of those songs that just the pace of it, the kind of the lyrics with it, the guitar riffs for it, it just always puts me in a good mood, and it's got kind of a really upbeat pace too. So it kind of gets me, if I'm driving, I end up probably about 20 over whenever I listen to it. And it's funny because it's a song that kind of was obscure for a while, and then it ended up being in a Shrek movie at one point. And I remember watching it with my kid. I was like, that's the Buzzcocks. I'm watching a cartoon with the Buzzcocks playing right now. But yeah, that's one song that no matter what, I have to listen to it, and I have to play it really loud.
That's funny, man. Shrek ruined multiple bands then, because I remember when Smash Mouth, you listen to their first album, totally different than what they are now.
Yeah.
All right.
I have a funny Smash Mouth story to share afterwards, too.
Okay.
Yeah.
We got to get through these. All right. My next one for me is OAR, Crazy Game of Poker. I love the song. It had a ton of meaning for me, I loved playing poker. All those kind of things, but then it became ultra significant when one of my closest poker buddies, Jesse, passed away, who introduced me to OAR. And so now, if that song ever comes on, it doesn't matter if it's me or if I'm with my wife, we instantly just say, "Hi, Jesse." That's the connection there. That's so cool. Definitely one of my top songs.
Very cool. Next one for me was the Guns of Brixton by The Clash. And Clash is probably one of those other bands too that I wish I was old enough to be able to see them, because they're the only band that mattered, right? That was their nickname. Guns of Brixton's this song. It's one of their not necessarily most well-known songs off of London Calling, which is probably one of their greatest albums. It's this really kind of almost reggae type riff to it, but it's also kind of macabre and dark too. And it came out at a time right when there was a bunch of riots in Brixton that had to do with Jamaican refugees, and the lyrics about it's this really defiant song. And it's the lyrics are, when they kick in your front door, how are you going to come with your hands on your head or on the trigger of a gun? And it's these really, it's a song that no matter what, it just makes me really get fired up about whatever issues pissing me off at the moment. But there's a lot of those things. So But it's just one of those songs that no matter what, it really gets me hyped up. You know, it might actually be a better walk-up song for me. Actually.
There you go. You just came up with it.
I did.
So my next one, if any of my friends from college are listening to this, they will make fun of me undoubtedly for this one. But there was a guy that was a local coffee shop artist when I was going to college in Fullerton, named Tyrone Wells, that every college girl within 12 miles was in love with, because he's just one of those singer-songwriters that wrote great lyrics. And so we saw him all the time. He actually led worship at the on-campus church and a bunch of that kind of stuff. And so you kind of felt connected to him. And he is good. He's talented. He's great. And so at some point I introduced my wife to his music, and she fell in love with kind of his big hit single during that time called Sea Breeze, which is this uber romantic singer-songwriter song. And it definitely, had I known I wouldn't get made fun of, probably would have been like one of our wedding songs. But I know all my college buddies would have crucified me for that song, because we all made fun of everyone that liked Tyrone at the time. But over the years, it has become one of those songs that for my wife and I is, you know, very sentimental and one of those things. So it's a cheesy song, but it is very well written and has great memories with it. So that's on my list.
Nice. Next for me was Sorrow by Bad Religion.
I love that song.
Yeah.
I love that song.
Yeah, it's got like a really cool intro to it, like, and it really builds, and you know, the lyrics are that talk about kind of broken families. It really hits on, you know, kind of just these really micro and macro type issues, you know. Right. And for some reason, just something about that chorus, like you can't help but just belt it out, you know. And that's just one song that no matter what, like I said, no matter what time of day, what mood I'm in, that one will always grab my attention.
I would agree with that one completely. That is, from my punk rock era, that is one of the few songs that is definitely carried over and continue to listen to a lot.
And it's not, you know, I think it's a good crossover song too. Like there's a lot of people that could really get into Bad Religion and not consider it to be like a punk rock song either. You know?
Oh yeah. But no, it's great. I love that track.
Yeah.
This is showing my love for hip hop, but the song Concrete Schoolyard by Jurassic 5.
Oh, yeah. I love J5.
Oh, my gosh. I think they're great. But it's one of those, I remember dancing around on Sunday afternoons in my dorm room, rapping this with my college roommates as we cleaned the room and stuff like that. And it's one of those songs that if it comes on word for word, singing along with it, it's just fun, classic hip-hop sound. So there's so much I love about that one.
Yeah, J5 is a great band that really revitalized what I thought would be kind of the traditional roots of hip-hop, you know, and really focusing on just rhyming and the beat and
lyrically creative and content, you know, driven.
Right.
Yeah. No, I love it.
The last one for me on the list, I had to put a Johnny Cash song on, but I spent a lot of time trying to figure out which one of those songs it was, and I batted around like 3 or 4. But the one that always like really gets to me is his song called "The Man Comes Around," and this came off when he started doing his American sessions, which were kind of towards the later part of his life and his career, when he started recording with Rick Rubin,
right?
And Rick Rubin of fame, of like, you know, coming up to creating the Beastie Boys.
Yeah, I was going to say he's a big hip hop.
Yeah, big hip hop guy that hooked up with Johnny Cash and came up with some amazing music. And I think he did 5 of these albums, and they were all predominantly cover songs by Cash, but you put them in Cash's voice and they're like instant gold.
Right.
But The Man Comes Around was actually one that was an original Cash song that he wrote, and it was kind of this tune that actually has a lot of religious references in it. So he references a lot from Revelations, and talks about the dark horse,
Right.
but it's a song that makes like the hair on my arm rise. It's just something about it that no matter what. And it was also, I mean, you could hear the age in his voice in the song, and you can kind of tell that you're getting towards and he realizes that getting towards the latter part of his career too. So that one seemed to beat out all the other Cash songs, and there's no shortage of great Johnny Cash music, but that one in particular always will be, I can play it on repeat on my iPod and never get sick of it.
Yeah. Johnny Cash does that, and he definitely, the hair standing up on your arms. I feel like that would be tough with Johnny Cash, because there's probably 5 or 6 of his tracks that I would say just revoke that response from you for sure.
Yeah.
So, gosh, my last one, I've crossed it out on here, switched it, and then as you were talking, I was like, oh, that one's even better. And so it's terrible.
Maybe we could revisit later.
That's right. We could come back. So. So the one I finally settled on, and I actually think this is probably good because it would rank up there all time for me, is Ain't No Sunshine by Bill Withers.
Oh, yeah, that's a good
one of the most covered songs of all time. But there is something so powerful and heartfelt about, I mean, you can feel what he's going through in that song.
That is so true.
And from a musical, like listening to him, when you listen to him do the part of the song, what is it? No, I'm going to blank on it. Where every time you sing along with him, you're like, how does he have that much breath? Like, there's that point in that song where you're like, okay, like you just tip your cap to him, because it's like nobody else could do that. And so many people have tried. There it is. And he says it like 38 and a half times. And it's just phenomenal.
That's a good one.
From a talent side, like you're just like, oh, you're the man. But lyrically too, it's like, wow. So there we go.
Yeah.
So, well, if you've stuck with us this long, we greatly appreciate it. We'll try to tag as many of these bands and kind of references, especially some of the obscure ones, in the show notes and stuff.
Yeah.
Take a look at them. If you connect with them, let them know that, the podcast sent you, and maybe we'll get a shout out or something along the way from them. Definitely let us know ideas, thoughts, anything you like on future episodes. Share it with your friends. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all of that fun stuff. Close us out.
Yeah, so you were listening to a Christian and Atheist walk into a bar where we bridge the religious divide, one adult beverage at a time.
That's right. Cheers.